I'm delighted to welcome David Kerrigan, author and international keynote speaker on emerging technologies, including AI, EdTech, retail, and healthcare. Will you please welcome David Kerrigan? Thank you.
To check whether it's still morning or do I actually say good afternoon. We have 3 minutes of morning left, and I know I'm the only thing between you and your lunch. So I will finish on time, I promise. The good thing is I'm not even paid by the slide, so I don't have to get to the end. But we're going to talk about AI. So it's such a small little word, such a big topic. And as I go around the world talking to audiences about what AI may mean for them, I'm reminded of the tale of the child who cried wolf. So the skepticism, if people keep on telling you that there's a huge threat, a big risk, but you can't see it, you start to get skeptical about it. And that's what people say about AI. They go, it's just another next big thing that big tech are trying to sell me on using fear. And I get that, because there's quite a lot of it. We have history in this. If we look at it, first off, you were told that LMSs were going to solve all your problems. And then you were told, no, LXPs are going to solve all your problems. And then, no, it's going to be LRSs. And it's like, you're nobody if you don't use L&DI as well. So I was going, what am I going to put on the end of this list? Because AI is going to look wrong. So I decided I'd go with the more technical phrase of LLM, so that everything begins with L. And we'll talk about what LLMs are in a few minutes. But I think, everybody has seen over the last year all of the hype, all of the headlines, that generative AI, it's a game changer. It is the next big thing. And it's what's going to make your lives either a misery or it's going to make your lives better, but somehow it's going to do a lot of change. And I also get a lot of feedback from people that they're worried because they see headlines like this that says, look, 80% of jobs are going to be impacted. And it gets that fear factor where people go, is this me? Is this going to come from my job? Is this going to upset my nice, easy life? And the answer is it probably is, but not necessarily in a bad way. Because we've been waiting for technology to make change for years. If we look at what's happened in EdTech, and I've been around education technology for a very, very long time now. And I think if we look back objectively, it's a little bit disappointing that technology has promised so much, but has it really made a difference? I think it's made some steps. So all of those L words on the last slide, they have done some good. But overall, I don't think they've delivered the promise, the differences that we really need. And that's not just my words. That's a quote from Bill Gates. But he finished the piece where he was talking about the impact of tech on education with this prediction, that in the next 5 to 10 years, AI is actually going to make the difference that we've all wanted. It's going to deliver the change that technology has promised for so long. But I think what's potentially the most interesting part of that quote is the time frame. It's 5 to 10 years before we really see the impact. But that doesn't mean that you can all take a break early for Christmas because your man on the stage said that AI thing is 5 to 10 years away. Right? It's not that simple. But what I do want to do today is go through what does it actually mean? What's the important things versus what's the hype? What is the skepticism degree that you probably should have? So what we'll do in about 30 minutes to lunch is we'll go beyond the hype and figure out what generative AI is going to mean. But I don't want to do all the work, so I'm going to get you guys to answer a question first. And you do get to ask me questions at the end, so it is all fair. It balances out. But I'm going to give you 4 options in terms of how you feel about AI in your world. So are you thrilled? Are you excited? Do you think this is a big thing? Or are you terrified? Do you think this is bad news? This is going to make my life harder? Or do you think, nah, it's actually no big deal. It's just another thing. It's not really important. And then your final option is it's too soon to tell. So hands up for number 1. Who's broadly positive? And number 2, who's broadly negative? Nobody. I'm not sure we got the message about psychological safety. It's okay to put up your hand. Okay, who thinks it's trivial? This is no big deal, and you're like, would he just shut up because I really want to get to the lunch part? There's no honesty in this room, is there? And who doesn't know? Who thinks it's too soon to tell? Okay. And how many people put up their hands for 1 and 4? So I want to help you sift through and find those little gold nuggets. Amidst all the hype, amid all the discussion, what in AI, in L&D, is really going to make a difference? Because there's been a huge amount of talk about this. Time for another poll. Hands up, anybody who has been involved in a discussion in your workplace about whether or not AI is a thing you should worry about. So there's a lot of talk. But I think in most cases, there's been very little action. So last poll for now. Who has actually used generative AI in their work officially? Oh, it's an important word. Okay, so very few hands. Okay, a few more. Okay. So maybe you're more active than some of the audiences I talk to. But if you go around and you survey people and you say, well, who's using AI? The general answers you get at the moment is about 1/3 of organizations have done something. They're using it somewhere in their work. And about 1/4 of senior leaders admit to using it themselves in a private capacity. So not necessarily sanctioned by the IT department. And that's quite important, that idea about whether or not it's happening obviously. Is it something that's visible? And is it something that actually matters, or is it just an experiment? Are you just doing it because it's kind of fun, or you think you should do it? So it's led to this kind of shadow IT, where people are using AI, but they're not actually talking about it. And in a survey done recently comparing, the US and Europe are very, very similar. But the big blue bars, the dark blue, are the people who are using AI unofficially. They're using it at home. And the people in the small little blue bar are the ones who are using it officially. So there's a huge disconnect. And that makes the discussion of AI quite difficult. Because if the official policy says, oh, you're not using AI, we're not using it. And I've had lots of conversations where I go into universities and the professors go, oh, we're going to ban AI. And I'm like, okay, I just need to go home now because this is not going to be a good conversation. Because everybody in the university is already using it. They're just doing it unofficially. Now, we'll just back up for a minute and say, how did we get here, right? So a year ago, if we'd been giving this talk, we wouldn't have been mentioning AI. Literally wasn't a thing when we were here last year. And what's changed is the release by OpenAI of their product, ChatGPT. And that only happened recently. And that's why, as people say, well, we've entered the age of AI, I think we actually need to talk about AI's age. and go, it's actually 1 year old. So it was 1 year old last week. Would have been really handy if we'd had this conference last week so that I could have said, look, it's its birthday. But it is. It's happy birthday, ChatGPT. And who's going to say it? Come on, somebody wants to say it, right? So this is what happened when I asked ChatGPT to create its own birthday image. And it's like, okay. Like, I suppose in fairness, most 1-year-olds can't spell their name, but you might expect that if AI is an existential threat to us all, it could spell. But then I looked at it and I went, that's not how you spell happy either, is it? And now that I'm getting picky, that's not how you spell birthday. So then I said, will I redo this image or will I use it as a teachable moment and say, look, you cannot rely on AI's output. And it's very obvious maybe in an image, but it's not always so obvious when you look at text. So we need to have that healthy skepticism about what we can and can't use AI for. Now, I just started throwing out the word ChatGPT as if it's an actual word. But of course, it's what technical people love to do, which is create acronyms. And it reminds me of what happened during the pandemic, when everybody talked about PCR. It's like, oh yeah, I got a PCR test, it was negative. You'd think they were all molecular biologists all of a sudden. Because how many people know what PCR stands for? Nobody on the medical table is allowed to answer. Right? But it became a word where everybody talked about it. It's polymerase chain reaction, if anyone has forgotten. But the thing is, we now talk about GPT as if we know what it stands for. So again, how many people know what GPT stands for? Okay. I had one lady in an audience in Athens last week who put up her hand, but she was wrong. So GPT, just so that you know, GPT stands for, this be your Christmas dinner table conversation, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Now, the G part is pretty straightforward. Generative, it generates things. That's not super difficult. The P for the pre-trained, that is a really important part. Anything to do with AI, the training data is critical. Always, always worry about what data was used to train your AI model. It always comes back to the data. And the T is the technical part. So transformer is the type of machine learning architecture within the models. So now you know what GPT stands for. Forget about it. Because much more important, where I started on that first slide, the more important acronym is LLM, which stands for Large Language Model. And the important thing to remember is that GPT is one example of a category called large language models. So it's really important. A lot of commentary talks about GPT as if it's the thing, but it's one example. And I'll explain why it's not even necessarily the most relevant example. So remember, it is an example of a category of large language models. It's just one model. And for anyone who says, like, okay, just now that I know what GPT stands for, doesn't help me. Tell me what it actually does. And the thing to remember about ChatGPT, in a nutshell, one slide to summarize it, which I know is doing a terrible disservice to the really smart people who actually created ChatGPT. But essentially, what it does is it just tries to continue a sentence. You give it a prompt, and you say, finish this for me. So it'll try to do that. And when you say it's going to make a reasonable continuation of the prompt that you give it, well, what does reasonable mean? Well, what reasonable means is that if you had read the internet, what would you think should come next in any sentence? And that's essentially what it's done. So the data that I said was so important, it's been trained on this data, it looks at that, and it goes, I think this is a reasonable sentence. And this is where I break the rules of presentation, where they say, make the important points really big on your slides so that everybody can read it. But I'm going to go the opposite way, because I want you all to squint and focus. So the important thing is actually this little orange sentence that's really hard to read. It's an eyesight test. But it's really important to remember that these models, they don't know what they're saying. It may look like they do. They may be convincing that they do. But actually, all they do is they know the statistical relationships between words. They go, these words kind of go together. That's all it's doing. And that's why it makes mistakes, because we all know that statistics are the first tool in anyone who wants to tell lies. You immediately revert to statistics. So slightly controversially, I kind of think, look, ChatGPT isn't the future. It's the underlying technology, the large language models. They are the things that you need to get your head around, not ChatGPT itself. Because one of the great things that we can do now is you can actually create your own GPT model. So not ChatGPT that OpenAI have created, but they have given you the power, and if you now go on to OpenAI, you can create your own model. And there's a little upload button there. So you can take your data and upload it and create a model, rather than relying on the data that ChatGPT was trained on. And that's why it's so important to look at the category of these models and not obsess about ChatGPT and make the mistake of just using ChatGPT as the exact same thing as generative AI. And the other way that I tend to look at this, and it was a happy coincidence when I was trying to come up with an analogy to describe this, where I said, this, to me, the way we talk about this AI, it's like a GP. I went, it's like, there it is. It's right there in the name, GP. Just take the T out of it, right? It's like a general practitioner. ChatGPT is like your medical GP. Very, very broad training. But if you have a problem, you want to go beyond that. You want to go to a specialist. And that's where AI is heading. ChatGPT, easy to remember, it's like a GP. And what you want to be looking for are specialist models, models that have been trained to do a specialist task, trained to do something that is useful for you. And you're going to see this massive array of specialist models coming to the market. And they're going to do all things. They're going to be specialists at marketing, specialists at learning and development. They're going to be specialists at creating content, at writing code, at giving legal advice and procurement. So things that were never really within the realm of automation before. But specialist models that are trained to do these tasks will be the future for AI. Now, people always ask me to predict what's going to happen next, and I kind of pick one of my favorite philosophers, and I go, look, it's hard to know what exactly is going to happen. So I try to deflect that question and say, well, let's ask the audience, but you're pretty tired of me asking you to put your hands up. So what I'm going to do is take a survey that was published about a week ago by Donald Taylor. And he did a survey, and he said, what do you think specifically to L&D is AI going to benefit? And top of the list was creating learning content faster. So people are just looking for efficiencies. And I think if we're honest about this poll, don't know is the most honest answer. Because I don't think people know now what this tech can and can't do. So they just pick the answer that they're like, okay, I think that's a fair answer. So I wouldn't necessarily place too much emphasis on those results. But it's useful to see, what are people in this space, in our sector, what are they thinking about? But for me, the critical part is saying, how do we actually bridge the gap? How do we move AI from something that we talk about to something that makes a difference, makes an impact in learning and development? So the crucial questions are, well, what can AI do versus what can't it do? We mustn't assume it can do everything or do everything well. And then we have to say, well, of those things that it's good at, how does that make a difference to learning? How do we actually harness this technology to deliver on what we want, which is better learning outcomes? And I think if we ask, what are the areas of L&D that it might make the most impact on? So I think it's the area of content generation. So generating content for us. Improving distribution. So how do we get the right content to the right people at the right time? And then what has perhaps eluded most L&D professionals for a long time is identifying those gaps. How do we know what the right content to the right people at the right time looks like? And they're the spaces that we should be focused on making AI work. How do we make it make a difference for us? And if we look a little deeper at that and we say, well, what might AI in L&D look like? So it's going to potentially give us efficiency at creating content. And it could enable new formats. So maybe we can move away from static linear content. And we can say, how about have conversational learning, where you can actually talk to a piece of learning material? What about simulations? Making people feel they're in an environment and actually going through a scenario. And what about potentially the holy grail of it? Having personalized learning, learning that adapts to people. It's been long promised, we've never managed to do it, but AI could. And to make this a little bit real, I've just picked out a few tools that I've come across. I'm not promoting one tool over the other, there's plenty of alternatives, but these are just some examples. So there's a French firm called Knowledge, and they let you upload a PowerPoint or a PDF document, and it will extract the learning materials from it, and in a matter of seconds, create quizzes and create glossaries. So all of a sudden, it's really quick and really easy to create knowledge checks. And then you have other tools. Video Pro is one example, where you can actually have it output a full motion graphic video learning material. You just give it a script. You can either upload a Word document and ask it to turn it into a video for you, or you can have GPT embedded in it and actually give it a prompt and say, make me a course about that. And the courses are pretty good. They're not necessarily the finished article. They're not necessarily what an experienced instructional developer would create, but they create it in seconds. And it can give you maybe 70% of the work, and you then add your human value to it. So it's a big deal. And if you are an instructional designer, it can be very easy to forget some of the core principles of learning design. So why not have a tool like ID Assist, which is a plugin that goes into Word, and it reminds you of good instructional design practice. So there are lots of tools there to make your job in L&D course creation easier. And from a delivery point of view, there are plenty of tools out there now. So this was one called Chat PDF, where you can upload a PDF and the user can chat with it. So instead of you having to read a 30-page PDF, you can just say, what are the top 5 things I need to know from this document? Which is what the learner wants. They don't want to go through the full PDF. But that is a big change in how we're interacting with learning. And then you have simulation tools. So one of the things that's really difficult to simulate is HR training around difficult situations. What if you need to train your managers how to have a difficult conversation with staff? It's very difficult to scale that. So why not do it in a safe environment and allow it to be repeated at scale, where you can say, I want you to go have a conversation with an employee, a virtual one, who is underperforming. And it will react, so it's not a set scenario. It's not a linear model like we've had before. This can adapt. If you're aggressive, it can respond by being defensive, or it might be aggressive back. So it's more dynamic than any previous types of learning. And then you have other tools. So obviously people go, well, look, I have a learning management system. I don't want to throw it out and put in all this new thing. So you have, from the Moodle partners like Enovation, offering an AI connector that lets you connect Moodle to other ChatGPT or Bard or other models. And adding that functionality into your existing learning management system. Things like Content Simplifier. So this is a tool, and this gets away from our current approach to learning, the one-size-fits-all approach. We just give everybody the same material and say good luck. But with Simplifier, you can press a button, and it will paraphrase the content of the PDF or Word file for you. But because we believe in doing this responsibly, it will also notify the course lecturer and say, look, your students are struggling. If everybody's asking to simplify this piece of content, maybe you need to re-look at this content. And I could go on for ages, but again, still very mindful, me getting between you and lunch. So I'm going to summarize some more tools and say, look, there's a ton of tools coming. So you can create digital presenters to bring boring content to life. People respond better when somebody is talking to them than just reading through or listening to a voiceover. There are amazing tools now for subtitles and localization. So I took a video of me talking about AI, as I tend to do, and I uploaded me in English, and I got back the video with me in French, Italian, Portuguese, and German. Absolutely perfect. I checked the translations with native speakers. But the cruel thing about this was, it didn't just translate. It cloned my voice, and it localized it, and it did the lip sync so that I actually completely convincingly look like I am a polyglot who speaks all these languages. And it's incredible. And it's also a bit scary, because then you start saying, well, you could make me say anything in any language. But there are all of these tools, and there's tons of them that will let you improve your production, clean up audio and video after the fact. But as exciting as those kind of features are, of course there needs to be a degree of caution, because the cliche from Spider-Man always says, with great power comes great responsibility, and it's true. So we need to be cautious. We had our issue earlier with the ChatGPT birthday cake, which quality is a little bit suspect. So we have to be concerned about the quality of AI's outputs. But remember what I said about it's not always super easy to spot. So I had a good example, I thought, of this, where I was getting ready to give a presentation, not about how AI was going to impact L&D, but how it was going to impact financial services. And I decided this was going to be my slide. What's a financial professional to do? And I wanted a nice image to make the slide look put some effort into designing it. And I think it turned out well. I think it's quite a nice image. But it's not the first image that generative AI gave me back. So I went to my generative AI service and I put in this prompt: give me a financial professional with a very skeptical face. What do you think it gave me back? So it gave me back this. It gave me back 4 millennial white men. And it's a very good example of the bias in the model. So this isn't about hallucinations. You hear about AI hallucinates, it makes things up, but it also perpetuates biases. If the training data that you put in is poor quality, this is what you're going to get. So you need to be on the lookout for bad outputs from AI. Now, these are things that can be corrected. We can fix this. So we can fix hallucinations in AI. There's already been a lot of work with a new, again, technical people love their acronyms. There's a new acronym called RAG as a mechanism to reduce hallucinations in AI. So we can fix it. And it's one of my pleas to people is to remember that AI today is the worst it will be. Don't sit there, please, and judge AI based on what it's done so far. It's going to change. So I was working out last night. This is the 26th time I have given a talk about AI this year. You'd think I'd know what I was saying by now. But the thing about it is, they're all different because it changes so fast. So don't judge it by what you see now. You have to be thinking, where is this technology going? What is it going to be like in a few weeks, a few months' time? What's it going to be like next year? I think there's a law you may be familiar with when we talk about technology. It's called Amara's law. And it states that we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term. So we get excited. We go, this is the next big thing. It's going to change everything. And then it doesn't. But what we typically do is we underestimate over a longer time frame, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, the scale of the impact that the technology is going to have. So any of you who are skeptical about AI, I think that's fine. You may feel, oh, he's crying wolf, it's not a real thing. But I think the skeptics have met their match. AI is the most important development in recent memory. It is the biggest change agent that we will see. And everybody involved in L&D now, it's very much a question of we're living at that intersection between commerce, the needs of the business, the consumers, our users, and technology. And we have to bring them all together. We have to take all those factors in as we work. And one of the weird things about AI in its current state is it's kind of everywhere and nowhere. It's everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. But it hasn't made that difference yet. And there's plenty of reasons for that, but they're typically not technical. They tend to be, the obstacles are more around our own understanding. What can this tech do for us? What is the best way to apply it in L&D? And what about the governance? Is it safe to use it? Are we going to suffer reputational damage if we put this in front of our users? So this is where I start to get a little bit scary. It's like you need a plan. You may have gotten away so far without doing anything with AI. But do not come back here next year without a plan for AI, or things will go badly for you. You need a plan. But luckily, because I'm nice, I brought a plan for you. So here's my simple 5-point plan of how you think about AI. So it's a tool. It's not a destination. It's something for you to harness, for you to use. But don't do it for the sake of it. Don't do it, because I should use AI. Do it because it makes a difference. Keep in mind how quickly it's changing. So don't judge it based on what you tried 4 weeks ago. It's changing, it's improving, and it will only continue to get better. There's more and more focus and more pressure to improve it. So you need to start learning about it, which is, it's fine because you've all just had half an hour of learning about it, so That's a good place to begin. But you've got to start evaluating it. You've got to look at the tools. And, again, picking up on some of the earlier topics, it's okay to fail. It's okay to try a tool and go, that's not for me. That's okay. But you need to do it. You need the hands-on experience of what works and what doesn't work with AI, because it will change how learning and development works. Not in a matter of weeks, but in a matter of years. From the content creation side, the distribution side. But remember as well, so I've looked at this very much from the L&D lens, but the organizations that you serve, they're changing. All the other functions are looking at how AI changes their day-to-day life. And the people. Remember, it's not all happening officially. There's plenty of people who are sitting at home in the evening on their personal laptops using AI, because for them, it is a superpower. AI is going to help people achieve things that they could never do before. And as L&D professionals, we should be absolutely supporting that on a continuing basis. So with that, it is time, not quite for lunch because you're allowed to ask questions first, but we're more or less ready for lunch. If you have questions, be delighted to take them, and I'll be on the Enovation stand just outside that door if you do want to continue the conversation. Because we're working with L&DI, and we will be running a deeper dive. So this is the 30-minute version of AI, but in March we'll be putting on a dedicated event. So if you're interested in learning more, make sure you let us know.
David Kerrigan, thank you so much. Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you, David.